Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I thought I would change it up a little bit and do something different. And that is sort of do a top 10 ranking kind of, I guess. Well, it is kind of a top 10 ranking, I guess, of my favorite Rick Grimes moments. And I kind of went throughout the series. There's some stuff that I left out that I feel conflicted with leaving out. And I may have to do a video on those moments talking about them just more in depth and whatnot. But I sort of went through it, and I did have to mention some honorable mentions, so I will get into that in this video, but I really wanted to talk about this because there's some really cool moments with Rick that I just kind of wanted to talk about. Again, I won't be able to really do it that much in depth in here because it is a top 10 video, and I'll be talking about 10 separate moments, and also there's honorable mentions included in that, and so this video could get really long if I did do that, right? So if you do want a video discussing some of these moments more in depth, I definitely will do that as well, because I mean, we do have a little bit of a break here. I mean, like 20 something days. It's not that long, but if you do like these kind of videos, I could definitely do that. So yeah, definitely post your top 10 moments of Rick Grimes down below. I am really interested in seeing exactly what you guys have to say about that, and I guess your opinions on my top 10 list as well. I will say as well, these aren't like top 10 episodes of Rick Grimes, or like, you know what I mean? Like some of them are moments and some of them are moments from like the same episode actually. So yeah, but obviously before we go any further, make sure to hit subscribe if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. There's a lot of Walking Dead content that will be coming out over the next month. Obviously the Daryl show is premiering in less than a month now. There's going to be a lot of stuff that I will be covering as we build up to the show's release. There's going to be a lot of Rick and Michonne teaser stuff as well that is probably going to likely be released during the release of Daryl Dixon, right? And also Fear the Walking Dead as well. Like I'm guessing that at the end of November, when Fear the Walking Dead is over, like the very last episode, we are likely going to get a full-on trailer for The Walking Dead Rick and Michonne, right? So there's going to be a lot to talk about over the next couple of months. So definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content. Now, I'm going to do this sort of talking about it, and it's going to be more of a discussion thing. I'm not going to make it so much of a top 10 type thing. But number 10 is the moment that Rick was taken by the CRM and says, "We are the ones who live." And it was the moment that happened, obviously, in the very last episode. The very final moment there. And the reason why it means so much to me, and really was my favorite moment, I know it was sort of a random scene at the end, and it didn't really mean too much overall, I would say, for the story, because if you think about it, it was kind of separate, and it was more just to include Rick Grimes in the ending, right? Like we had Rick and Michonne there. Their speeches at the end talked about the people that they lost and discussed really like, we are the ones who live. Like we remember them. They're still living within us, and we're going to keep going. And it's sort of the spirit of The Walking Dead. It was a very, very powerful moment, and it was inspirational. You know, I think Rick's smile there was something that was just insanely inspirational. Like you think of the amount of pain and suffering that he's going through right now. He can't even get back to his family. He's in like the worst place ever. And he got caught again. Like he actually had a chance in escaping. He has a way of maybe getting out. And then the CRM finds him right there. And he's like, I'm going back there. But he smiles because he knows like this isn't the end. I'm going to get out of this. Like the confidence he has. It's crazy inspirational. Really, really amazing scene. Number 9 for me is when he has to actually put Sophia down. I think this was the moment where The Walking Dead became a different type of show. I think before this show was, you know, a very, I don't want to say generic show, but it was obviously a very groundbreaking show in so many aspects, but it was just whatever show, you know, there's good shows out there, but it was this reveal for me that it just did so much, I think, for the franchise. And it just showed me that this show is different. The reveals here and the stuff that happens with the characters is something that is just, I've never seen it before like that. I've never seen it done in a way where your characters are just, they're so well developed and you're really feeling what they're feeling. And it's so hard to explain, but I think that's why The Walking Dead has been so successful over the years. I really feel like this was the moment where he became the Rick Grimes that we know. This is where during the season 2 arc, you know, I think before this, you could argue that maybe the group was sort of co-led by Rick and Shane. I feel like Shane really was more of the leader overall, you know, because he kind of was always that to Rick. He was always the leader. He always sort of taught Rick what to do. But I think this moment here is where Rick was like, I am the leader of this group. And I'm sure Shane felt it. I'm sure everyone in that group felt it, like we need to follow Rick Grimes now. Number 8, Rick and Daryl discussing Carl in season 9, episode 4. I had to include this in here because it was something that, first of all, it was Rick and Daryl's like really like last moment together. they got into this argument. They were fighting about Negan, obviously, because Daryl and Maggie were on the same side. They were so upset, so angry with Rick and Michonne because they chose to keep him alive, right? And they hated that. And so this whole thing here, obviously Daryl bringing Rick here was sort of to keep Rick away because Maggie was going to go after Negan, right? So there was this whole thing here, and Rick was just super upset about that. And Rick and Daryl just let it all out. They really got into a huge argument about it. And, I think it didn't really get resolved entirely because of what they were dealing with, right? Like there was so much there because of the walkers and all that. But Rick breaking down in that scene, starting to cry and stuff about Carl and just how much that hit Daryl, but Daryl's also still holding up his side of the argument, it was just a really great scene. And it's one of those things that, when you watch the scene, it's sad to think that that really is like their last scene together. I know that there's this scene on the bridge. I don't really equate that as their last scene because it was more Daryl looking at Rick and there was not really much there. Rick in that scene didn't even believe they were there, right? Rick the entire time thought all of it was a hallucination. So it's not really, to me, their last scene. I think this scene was, and it was just a really great Rick and Daryl moment, and I'm praying it's not their last moment. It really can't be. There has to be a reunion. There has to be some more story to tell with Rick and Daryl, and not just a final reunion scene. I don't want that. I want an actual, like, the last 10 episodes or something with those characters, and you see Rick and Daryl working together. I want that so bad. Number 7, Rick gives Gareth a warning. So this was just a really cool scene. And it's one of those moments where you look at Rick in general. And when you have these cool moments with big characters like this, it just brings them to a whole new level. And it was something that, and obviously the moment that eventually does happen, it's higher up on this list here, but I guess that's a little bit of a spoiler, but this warning was just insane because I remember watching this episode and it really felt like they were trapped. It really felt like there was no way they were going to escape. And Rick just staring Gareth in the face and giving him a warning like that, like he did not care. Like he was not scared of anything. You were not going to break Rick Grimes. You weren't. And I remember watching this scene when he said that, I got goosebumps. I was just like, what are you doing, man? Like you should not be doing that right now. Number 6, Rick wounded and trying to get back. And this happens obviously in his very last episode. And I'm not talking about the bridge scene or anything like that. I'm kind of talking about the end. And again, this is kind of like almost 2 episodes. It's like the ending to episode 4 of season 9 and then sort of the beginning and leading up to the end of episode 5. It was the fact that he fell on rebar or whatever you call it, like that pipe. And he's so severely wounded, after trying to get away on that horse. And then he's traveling back. These walkers are following him. He's having all these hallucinations of people that he's met throughout the years. And they're almost teaching him like these final lessons. And they're talking to him about these things that are just conflicting him. And it was a really, really crazy deep dive into Rick Grimes as a person and what he stands for. And I love the inspiration, the motivation for Rick to try and get home, to try and find his family, to keep everyone safe. And it really was it's the perfect like Rick Grimes episode. I think that one. And, I think a lot of people focus on the ending and some of the more exciting stuff there. But I think if you really go back and you watch episode 4 and 5, just the moments building up to that moment, it's so good. It's so amazing. Number 5, Shane's death. So Shane's death to me was, it's a moment that, again, I know some people might have an issue with me having this so high up on this list, but I really, really like that moment. It was something that when you're looking at all of season 2, you're looking at the conflict between Rick and Shane, and Rick trying to just reason with him and to try keep things, very civil and working with like his best friend. Like Shane was like his brother, like they've been friends forever. And it started to get really messed up because there was conflict with his family and there was just all of these issues. And when you get to that very last scene there and, it just really comes down to that moment. And I think Rick he knew, he was like, Shane just can't be alive anymore. Like he's a threat to me at this point. And it's just, the emotional buildup there is so insane. It's so intense and you're really feeling it. And the second he has to put Shane down and that happens, the yelling and just everything in that scene, it's crazy. Honestly, really phenomenal scene. I miss Shane as a character. John Bernthal is just absolutely incredible. Number 4, blowing up the bridge to save everybody and then wakes up with the CRN. So this moment obviously is something that people really, really like. It's definitely not my favorite Rick Grimes moment. Obviously, it's number 4 though, so it's definitely really high. But I think this was just so inspirational. Rick, like, he's walking away from these walkers, he's leading them to this certain place, and he eventually sees the bridge and just what the bridge stands for. Because the bridge, he fought so hard to have just been made, because it would, you can deliver supplies to the sanctuary, you can keep all these communities alive, and it's something that he really wanted. He wanted everyone to work together, and everyone was refusing to, but he was the one person that was like, no, this needs to happen. We need to have this happen. And I love the fact that Michonne also believed in that as well. Michonne was helping him out with that. And it was the Grimes legacy. It was something that, like, that bridge needed to stand because it meant so much. And so obviously when he sees it and he's like, I have a chance to actually, save all these communities, because the walkers were just getting insane. There were so many of them. So the decision to blow up the bridge and kind of sacrifice himself in that sense is just, he's a hero. Rick Grimes is as simple as that. He is the hero to the story, and he went out like that. And then he wakes up with the CRM, and then you have space junk playing. Like, it's just the whole thing, it brings you through all of these moments. The whole entire moment there with Rick in his last moments here on The Walking Dead were just, I guess technically not his last moments anymore, but just insane. Really, really cool. Number 3 is the church scene in season 3, episode 5. Wait, I said that backwards. Season 5, episode 3. So to me, this was probably, there's one more moment that definitely was darker, but this was just, again, really insane to have Rick just, again, I mentioned earlier, he gave Gareth that warning, and for him to actually just stick to that and be like, you know what, I'm actually going to do this. And when he, the shot goes to the red machete and you see him just sort of his hands like hovering above it, it's just like, what he's about to do. Just with how dark the scene got. I really love the fact that some of the characters in the group as well disagreed with it. I think that is something that should happen a lot more. I think later on in the series, a lot of our characters kind of just always agreed with each other. And when they didn't agree with each other, that's what was a lot of fun. And I think this scene here, you had certain characters that were just, they were on Rick's side and they were going to be doing all of this. But you had others that were just like, this is so wrong. I don't want to take part in this. I kind of understand it, but I just, they're so conflicted with it. They couldn't even be in the room. And there's like a bunch of issues there. And just, back then too, there was this whole thing of, is this really right? Because of what you're teaching Carl, right? And Carl's learning a lot of this. And this came after Herschel's death. And Herschel brought up a lot of these issues to Rick. So just to see Rick double down on this, and it just got that much darker. Like, again, this scene is absolutely incredible. Number 2, Rick's fight with Pete that caused them to look crazy to everybody. So I probably should like title these better, but it is what it is. I think in this moment, he just became Shane. Like, this was something that everyone discussed, sort of building up. Obviously, it was always a topic of conversation. Like, Shane was right. Shane was right. And looking back now, could we say that Shane was right? I would argue, yeah, I think he was always right. I know sometimes at moments throughout the series, you sort of debate that, and sometimes it goes back the other way where you're like, no, he was wrong. Rick was right back then with Randall and all that. But, I look back at it overall and I'm like, no, what he did was the right thing. Like Shane overall, I think Shane had the right mindset. It does overall. It's unfortunate because it's just obviously it led to his death, and that's just something that could happen sometimes. Obviously, Rick has had moments like that where he's dealt with these really insane situations because of acting a lot like Shane. This scene, though, just because of how civil they were acting, and obviously us as fans, we know that they were faking. We knew that Rick and them had this whole other darker side. But for everyone to finally see it, for Rick to just snap like that, and then the way he did, it's one of my favorite scenes. You watch the whole thing, and then it's kind of cool because Michonne just like knocks him out at the end. And obviously at this point, we had no idea that Rick and Michonne would be together, but it's kind of cool of just a foreshadowing. Like, Michonne really grounded him in that moment, like took care of him and was like, all right, enough, Rick, calm down, kind of thing, right? And so here are some honorable mentions. I wanted to include this in the list, but it was just really hard. The first one, Rick's speech with Carl in season 2. I really love that scene. I think it was just absolutely incredible. It showed how amazing Rick was as a father, just teaching him about, just you have to do what's right, and telling him to go and fix his whole thing that he did, right? And just to man up and just own up to his mistakes, right? I really love this scene. Another one was You're My Brother, Daryl. I think that moment was just absolutely incredible. The third one was how crazy he went after Lori's death. I think that whole thing with the prison was just absolutely just, it showed Rick at, I almost want to say his worst, but really it wasn't at all. That was not his worst. Like Rick went much crazier later on, but back then it just seemed like there was no coming back from it. Like he was so far gone at that point. But number one, and you guys probably guessed this, but Rick Grimes killing Joe the Claimer. I cannot get over this scene. This scene still gives me goosebumps to this day. It is a moment that I think it's going to be one of the best moments ever, at least for me. It's just what that represented in that moment. Like you thought Rick already hit a certain peak where it was like, he can't get any worse than this, and he can't push the boundaries that much more in keeping his family safe. But he just went so much more extra there in that moment. Like, you know, Carl was obviously in a very dangerous situation. You saw what was happening with Michonne, and then Daryl as well. And Rick was just trapped. And honestly, when you're watching it, how dark the scene gets, I love the fact that it was literally just a spotlight on like this little spot in the road with like this truck or whatever. And Rick is just held at gunpoint and he's on his knees and he can't do anything about it. And you sense it. You just sense the tension building in it. I like, just the work done in this scene is absolutely incredible. And then he just, at some moment, like again, this is something with Andrew Lincoln and his performance as Rick Grimes. You see it in his eyes. You just kind of see like there's something there, and it's relatable for almost everyone who is like that protective, and anyone who relates with like, I want to protect my family and I will do anything for my family. You saw that in Rick in that moment. I think Andrew Lincoln just did that moment so perfectly. And then when he just snaps in that moment and then eventually fights Joe the Claimer, and then just when he kills him, he literally bites his neck. Like everyone was shocked. He scared every single person. All the Claimers were terrified. And then they were able to take care of all of them. And then Rick eventually goes and kills that other Claimer in the most vicious way. And just the way it was done, and just you would hear the knife wounds, and Rick just did not stop. He did not care. This was like, honestly, in anything I've ever seen, it was probably the darkest thing I've ever seen from a character that we saw in season 1, episode 1, not being that dark. He was a very normal person and he got pushed to his limits. And you know, obviously that's a very, very dark scene, but there's an inspiration to it in the sense of, I will fight to keep my family safe and I don't care what I have to do. And it's something that for me personally, obviously as a single father of 3, you watch that scene and it gives you that extra motivation to just beat the world. And, you know, I mean, Lori obviously said that, right? She said like, you're going to beat this world, Carl, which sadly obviously didn't happen. But I mean, you could probably make some arguments that maybe he did in a sense. But yeah, you know, I think again, this scene was just absolutely incredible. One of my favorite Rick Grimes scenes of all time. I don't think there will be a moment that will ever beat it, but we'll have to wait and see, because The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live airs at some point, I'm guessing early 2024. Could there be moments in this series that will top a lot of these moments? Could there be a moment in this series that will be the best moment of all time and will take my number 1 spot here at some point in the future? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I thought this video would be really fun. These are my top 10 Rick Grimes moments of all time. Definitely post your top 10 down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.